Hi, I'm Jared, and I use Bittrex 24 to manage projects because it gives me choice.
In this lesson, we're going to learn a feature of JavaScript called modules, which is a better way to organize our code. So first, let's take a look at a problem that we have in our current code. We're going to go to our files here, and we're going to open amazon.html. And then we're going to scroll to the bottom of this file to our script tags. So right now, we're using 3 script tags to run all of our JavaScript. So this runs all the code in cart.js, and then it runs all the code in products.js. And finally, it runs all the code in amazon.js. So this is basically the same thing as combining all the files together into one big file and then running all of our code. However, there's a big problem with using script tags like this. And that problem is it can cause naming conflicts. So in our situation here, we created a variable named cart in cart.js. This means we can't use a variable named cart in any of our other files. So for example, if we went to amazon.js, and then we scroll to the top here, and let's say that we try to create another variable named cart. So at the top, we type const cart equals square brackets and save. And now if we go back to our project, you'll notice that the website stops working. And if we right click, inspect, and open the console, it will tell us that we got an error, and it says that cart has already been declared. So this is happening because we created a variable called cart in cart.js. And then later in amazon.js, we created another variable named cart. Now we can't have 2 variables with the same name in JavaScript, and this causes an error, and it causes our website to break. So this is called a naming conflict when we have 2 variables with the same name. So the big problem with script tags is if we go back to our code, you can see here that it's really hard to tell which variables have been created in other files. And it's really easy to accidentally create a naming conflict like this. So that's the problem with using script tags like this and running our code one file at a time. It's very easy to get naming conflicts. So now we're going to learn how to solve this problem using a feature of JavaScript called modules. So a module basically contains a variable inside a file. So now this variable is not going to cause conflicts with anything outside the file. For example, in our project, we created a variable called cart, and we want to contain this variable inside the cart.js file so that it doesn't conflict with the cart variable inside the amazon.js file. So we can do this using a module. So now let's learn how to create our first module. We're going to go back to amazon.html, and then here, to create a module, we're simply going to delete this line of code that uses a script tag to load cart.js. So we'll delete it and save, and you'll see that the website is working again. So how does this work? When we use a script tag, it will run all the code inside cart.js. So this code will create a cart variable, and this will cause a naming conflict. By removing the script tag, we're no longer running the code inside cart.js. So we're no longer creating a cart variable, and it will no longer cause a naming conflict. Running the code inside, the website is working again. So how does this work? When we use a script tag, it will run all the code inside cart.js. So this code will create a cart variable, and this will cause a naming conflict. By removing the script tag, we're no longer running the code inside cart.js. So we're no longer creating a cart variable, and it will no longer cause a naming conflict. So to create a module, we simply do 2 steps. Number 1, we create a file and write our code inside the file. And number 2, don't load the file with a script tag. By doing this, any variables we create inside the file will be contained inside the file, and it won't cause naming conflicts. So that's basically how we create a module. Okay, so now we run into another problem in our code. If we open amazon.js, we created this cart variable as an example, but what we actually want to do is to keep the cart variable inside cart.js because we want to keep all the code that's related to the cart inside this file. So in amazon.js, we're going to delete this code. And if we save and then go back to our project and click add to cart, you'll notice that it no longer works. So let's look at the console again to see what error we get. We'll right click, inspect, and open the console, and it's going to tell us that cart is not defined. So the problem that we have here is that in this file, we're using the variable cart. But now, because we're not loading cart.js using a script tag, the cart variable doesn't exist anymore. It's contained inside cart.js, and we can't access it from the outside.
Bro, if you keep learning Python like this, you won't get...
So now we're going to learn how to get a variable out of a file or a module. To do that, we're going to do 3 steps. The first step is to add a type equals module attribute. The second step is to export, and the third step is to import. Let's learn these steps one by one. So the first step is to add a type equals module attribute. We're going to open amazon.html, and we're going to scroll to the bottom. And here in the last script tag, where we load amazon.js, we're going to add an HTML attribute here. So we're going to type equals module and save. So the type equals module attribute basically lets this file get variables out of other files. It basically enables this feature. Now the second step is to export. So we're going to go to cart.js, and now we're going to choose which variables can be accessed outside of this file. So for example, we want to access the variable cart outside of this file. To do that, in front of the variable, we're just going to type the word export and space and save. So now this variable can be used outside of cart.js. The last step is to import. So we're going to go to the place where we're going to use this variable, which is inside amazon.js. And now at the top, we're going to tell the computer which variable we want to get from another file. So we'll type import, open curly bracket, close curly bracket, and between these brackets, we're going to give the name of the variable we want to get, which is the cart variable. And then we'll tell the computer which file we want to get this variable from. So we'll type from, single quotes, and semicolon. And now inside these quotes, we're going to locate the file using a file path. So let's open up our files here so it's easy to see what files we have. So right now we're in amazon.js, and we want to locate cart.js. So the first step is we actually need to get out of the scripts folder. We're in the scripts folder, and we need to get out of it and into the data folder. So to get out of the current folder that this file is in, we're going to type ... So ... basically represents the folder outside of this current folder, which is this folder right here, JavaScript Amazon projects. And then we're going to type a / to go outside of the scripts folder. So now that we're outside of this folder, we're going to go into the data folder. So here, we're going to type data and then a / to go into this folder, and we're going to locate the file cart.js, and save. So what this code does is that it's going to take the variable cart out of the file cart.js, and we use this file path here to locate that file. So as a reminder, ... means to go outside of the current folder, outside of scripts, into here, and then we go into the data folder, and then inside the data folder, we find cart.js. So those are the 3 steps to get a variable out of a module. First, we add a type equals module attribute to enable this feature, and then we export the variables that we want to get out. And finally, we import the variables when we need them. Now there's 2 more things that we need to know that we want to get out. First, we add a type equals module attribute to enable this feature, and then we export the variables that we want to get out. Number 1, we have to put all of our imports at the top of the file. And number 2, in order for modules to work, we need to use a live server. So for example, if I open the folder that contains amazon.html, so I open JavaScript Amazon project, and then I select this HTML file and right-click, open with Google Chrome, the website won't work. And that's because modules don't work if we open the HTML file directly like this. So let's close this for now. And to get modules to work, we need to open our code editor, and then right-click the HTML file, and open with live server. So in this course, in order for modules to work, we need to use live server to open our HTML files. So now that we learned how to use a module, let's talk about the benefits of modules. The first big benefit is that it helps us avoid naming conflicts. The only time that this causes naming conflicts is if we import this variable and we have another variable named cart inside this file, like this. So this will again create a naming conflict. If I save this, the website will stop working. But at least now we have control over when naming conflicts happen. They will only happen if we import the same variable name. Now modules have another feature that allows us to avoid this problem as well. So after the variable name that we import, we can type as and then a different name, such as my cart, and save. So this will basically take the import and rename it to my cart, so that this will no longer conflict with this variable name. So as you can see, modules have a lot of features that help us avoid naming conflicts when we have lots of files in our project. So now I'm just going to delete this and put the code back because that was just an example, and save. So the second big benefit of modules is that we don't have to worry about the order of our files. Before, when we loaded everything with script tags, we had to make sure that we load cart.js first because we need the cart variable to be created, and then we can use it in amazon.js. So the order of our script tags really matter, and it becomes really hard to manage when we have lots of files in a big project. But now with modules, we can just import the variables that we need, and we don't have to worry about the order that we're loading our files. So as you can see, modules are a better way to organize our code, especially in bigger projects. So now let's use Git and save our changes. So we'll go to the Git section here, and it will tell us we changed 3 files. In amazon.js, we removed the script tag and added type equals module. In cart.js, we exported the cart variable. And in amazon.js, we imported the cart variable from cart.js. So now let's save these into Git. So here we'll type a message, use modules and import cart from cart.js, and commit. Now that we learned modules, let's use them in more places in our project. So let's close this for now, and we're going to open amazon.html. And next, we're going to turn products.js into a module as well. So we'll start off by deleting the script tag, because the script tag will just load all the code onto the page. So we'll delete this and save. So notice that our website stops working. And now inside amazon.js, we need to access products from products.js. So again, we're going to do 3 steps. The first step is to add a type equals module attribute, which we already have, so we don't need to do this again. The second step is to export the variables that we want to get out. So in this case, we want to get the products variable out of the products.js file. So let's open our files and open products.js, and we'll scroll to the top. So to get the products variable out of this file, in front of the variable, we're going to type export and space and save. And the last step is to import the variable that we need. So inside amazon.js, we need the products variable. So at the top, we're going to type import curly brackets, and then inside here, we're going to type the variable name that we want to get, which is products. And we're going to get this variable from single quotes, semicolon, and then inside here, we're going to locate the products.js file. So we're going to type ... and / to go outside of the current folder, so outside of the scripts folder, and then we're going to go into the data folder. So we'll type data and a / to go into the folder, and we're going to locate the file products.js and save. So now that we're importing this variable from this file, the rest of our code will work, and our website will start working again. So that's how we turn products.js into a module as well. So let's go into Git and take a look at our changes. So in amazon.html, we deleted the script tag, and then in products.js, we exported the variables that we wanted to get out, and then in amazon.js, we imported the variables that we need from the file, and save. So let's type a message and save these changes into Git. Import products from products.js and commit. Let's close this, and let's open amazon.html. Now the last thing is, you might be wondering, should we also delete this script tag that loads amazon.js? And the answer is no, because we still need one JavaScript file to load our code. So this file will import from all the other files that we created. And this is how we organize our code in a real website. So this file is called the entry point. So now that we've seen some examples of modules, we're going to use modules to organize our code better. So let's go into amazon.js. And then we're going to scroll down to the code for the add to cart button. So inside this file, we're going to scroll down here, all the way down to this code here. So this is the code that we run when we click add it to cart. And you'll notice that we're running a lot of code here when we click that button. We're running code that adds the product to the cart, and we're also running code that calculates the quantity and updates the page. So a best practice in programming is that when we have a lot of code here that does different things, it's better to split these up into smaller functions to make our code easier to read. So here, this part of the code takes the product ID and then adds it to the cart. So it makes sense to split this into its own function. So let's scroll up, and at the top here, let's create a function for this code. So we'll type function, and let's call it add to cart, brackets and curly brackets. And then we're just going to move all this code into the function. So we'll select this code, and then right-click, cut, and then inside this function, right-click and paste. And then down here, we're going to run this function inside here. So when we click add to cart, we're going to run add to cart function that we just created and save. So now let's give this a try. So we'll click add to cart, and unfortunately, it doesn't work anymore. So let's take a look at the console to see if there's any errors. We'll right-click, inspect, and then open the console, and it's telling us that product ID is not defined. So if we look at our code here and scroll up in the function, you'll notice that we're using product ID, but it's no longer anywhere in the function. And that's because product ID is outside the function. So we actually want to keep this code outside because it's using this button. So instead, we're going to take product ID and put it into a function using a parameter. So at the top of the function, we're going to add a parameter product ID. And then when we call this function, we're going to pass it the product ID. So we're going to take this value, put it into the function, and save it in here, and then the function can run as normal. So now if we save, and then go to our project, and click add to cart, you can see that it's working again.
Hey developers, join us for the biggest AI competition with over $10,000 in cash prizes. Yep.
Next, let's go back and scroll down. And we're going to put the rest of our code into its own function as well to make it more organized. So at the top here, let's create some new lines and create a function. And this code updates the cart quantity on the page here. So let's name this function update cart quantity, brackets and curly brackets. And we'll move this code into the function. So let's select this code and then right-click, cut, and then in here, right-click and paste. And then down here, we'll call the function using update cart quantity and brackets and save. So as you can see, by splitting up our code into smaller functions, it makes our code a lot easier to read. When we click add to cart, it's really easy to understand what's going on. First, we're going to add a product to our cart, and then we're going to update the cart quantity. So now let's save, and then go back to our project and try it out. And you can see that everything is working again. So we're going to do two more things to better organize our code. So let's go back to our code. And the first thing is we're going to scroll up to the add to cart function. And I made a small mistake in the previous lesson. I actually want to rename this parameter from item to cart item instead to make it a little more clear. So we're just going to rename this to cart item. And here as well, rename it to cart item and save. And we'll scroll down here. And we're going to do the same thing for this parameter. So we'll rename it to cart item. And then here, cart item and save. And the last thing we'll do is let's scroll up to the add to cart function. So you'll notice that this code manages our cart. So it's actually a best practice to move this function into cart.js because cart.js contains all the code that's related to the cart. A best practice is to group related code together into its own file. So here, let's take the function add to cart. We'll select it and then right-click, cut. And then inside cart.js, we're going to right-click and paste. And just move that function into this file because this file contains all the code that's related to the cart. So now that this function is inside the file, we need to access it from amazon.js. And we can do that using modules, using the features export and import. So inside cart.js, in front of the function, we're going to export it so we can use it in other files. So let's save this file. And then inside amazon.js, we're going to scroll to the top. And you'll notice that we're already importing something from cart.js. So we actually don't need to write import again. Here, we can actually import multiple things from this file by typing comma and space, and then something else that we want to import. So in our case, we're going to import the function add to cart. So here, we'll type comma, add to cart. So now it will import both the cart and the add to cart function from this file. So imports can import multiple things from a file. Imports have another syntax, import star as. This imports everything from a file and groups it together inside this object. And then we can access each import as a property or a method. So lastly, I'm just going to scroll down to my code here. And I'm just going to remove this extra new line and save. Now you might be wondering if we should move update cart quantity into cart.js as well. So this function actually handles updating the web page rather than managing the cart. So we're going to keep this function inside this file for now. So now let's go into Git and save our changes. So we'll go here, and inside cart.js, we moved the add to cart function, and then we exported it. And then inside amazon.js, we imported the add to cart function. And then down here, we took the big block of code that we had before, and we separated it into two functions, add to cart and update cart quantity. And this made our code a lot easier to read. So now let's type a message describing our changes. Move add to cart into cart.js and commit. Next, we're going to create the checkout page in our final project, and we're going to use modules to organize our code again. So let's open the final project, and we're going to click this cart icon in the top right. And this will take us to another page, which is the checkout page. On this page, we can see the products that are in our cart. So if you're wondering how that cart icon works, it basically uses an HTML element called a link element, which looks like this. Link elements have a special attribute called href. when we click a link element, whatever is inside the href attribute, it will open it in the page. So if we put youtube.com inside the href and we click the link, it will open youtube.com in our browser. If we put a file like checkout.html inside href, it will look for a file called checkout.html and open that file. So in our project, if we look at our code and open our files, inside amazon.html, we're basically just using a link element or an A element. And this has an href of checkout.html. So what this does is it's going to look for a file called checkout.html beside the current file, amazon.html. So here's amazon.html, and it's going to look for checkout.html beside it, and then open that in our browser, which is how that cart icon works. So in our browser, at the top, you can see that it opened checkout.html. So that's basically how a link element works and how we can navigate from one page to another. You can learn more about link elements in my HTML and CSS full course. But for now, we're going to learn how to build the checkout page using JavaScript. So first, let's take a look at the code for this page. So again, the code is inside checkout.html. So in our code editor, we're going to open checkout.html, and this is the code for the page that we saw earlier that contains our cart. So just like with the home page, instead of writing all this HTML manually, we're going to use JavaScript to generate this HTML. So first, we need to add JavaScript to this page. So let's go down to the very bottom here, and right before the end of the body, we're going to create a script element to load some JavaScript. And we'll give it an attribute source equals double quotes, and then a file we want to load. So let's create a new JavaScript file for this page. So inside our scripts folder, let's click amazon.js and then click this icon to create a new file. And let's name this file checkout.js and press enter. And now we're going to load this page inside checkout.html. So here in the source attribute, we're going to locate this file. So first, we need to go into the scripts folder. So we'll type scripts and then a slash to go into the folder, and then we'll load the file checkout.js. And next, we're going to add another attribute, type equals double quotes module. So remember from earlier in the lesson, this attribute enables module features for this file. So now this file can import from other JavaScript files. So now let's save, and let's open checkout.js. And we'll start creating this page with JavaScript. So let's go back to our page first and take a look at the structure of this page. So you can see on this page, we actually have two sections. We have the cart section on the left, which shows the products in our cart. And we also have the payment section on the right, which calculates the cost of our order. So let's use JavaScript to create the cart section first. So remember, the main idea of JavaScript is first, we're going to save the data, and then we're going to generate the HTML. And finally, we'll make it interactive. Let's start by saving the data that we need for this section of the page. So for this section, we're basically displaying a list of products along with the quantity of each product that we want to buy. And if you remember, we already created a data structure to represent this, which is our cart. Inside our cart, we have the ID of the product as well as the quantity that we want to buy. So we can just reuse this data structure to create this section. So let's go into our code, and we're going to open cart.js. So inside here, we have an array called cart that's supposed to represent our data here. So right now, our cart is empty. So to make it easier for us to develop, we're just going to add some default values into this array. So inside here, let's create an object and put one product into our cart first. So looking at this page, the product that we want to put is the socks. So we'll go back into our code, and I'll rearrange my windows so we can see it side by side. And we're going to get the product ID for the socks here. So we're going to go into products.js, and then here's the socks. We're just going to take this ID, right-click, copy, and then inside the cart. And remember, we structured our data so that each cart item has a product ID as well as a quantity. So here, we're going to create the same structure that our current code uses. So we're going to give each object a product ID, colon, and single quotes. And we're just going to right-click and paste the ID that we copied earlier. And then we'll type a comma, and we'll give it a quantity, colon, and for the first item, we're going to give it a quantity of 2. So we'll just create a cart that kind of matches what we see on this page. Next, let's create a second cart item to represent the basketball. So we'll type comma, curly brackets. We'll give it a product ID, colon, and single quotes. And then we're going to get the ID for this basketball. So inside products.js, we're going to scroll down to the basketball here, and we're going to copy this ID, right-click, copy, and then inside cart.js, in here, right-click, and paste. And we'll give this one a quantity, colon, 1, and save. So what we're doing here is we're just creating some default values that we can use to write the code to generate this page. So this is just for development. When we're actually using the website, the cart will start off as empty. So if we compare our data to our page, you might notice that there's a few things that are missing, such as the product's image, the name, and the price. So how come we're not saving these into our data? And that's because we're using a special technique. We're just saving the product's ID, and then we can use this ID to search for this product inside the product's array here. So using the ID, we can find all the other details of the product, like the image, the name, and the price. So there's no need to save this data twice, inside the products array and inside the cart array. All we have to do is save the ID of the product that we want and then search for it. So this technique is called deduplicating the data, or normalizing the data. And this is a very common technique in software engineering.
The global machine learning market is expected to touch $31.36 billion by 2028.
Okay, so the one other thing that we probably need to save in our data is the delivery times and the delivery options. But we're going to leave this for the next lesson because it requires some more features that we're going to learn. To save in our data is the delivery times and the delivery common technique in software engineering. Okay, so the one other thing that we probably need to save in our data is the delivery times and the delivery options. But we're going to leave this for the next lesson because it requires some more features that we're going to learn. So for now, we finished saving the data that we need. The next step is to use this data to generate the HTML. So let's open checkout.js. So I'm just going to drag it to the bottom here so we can see it side by side. So the first step we need to do is to take the cart array and import it into checkout.js so we can use it. So in here, let's import curly brackets, the cart array. And we're going to import it from single quotes and semicolon. And we're going to use a file path between the quotes to locate cart.js. So let's open our files again. And to get from here to here, we need to go out of the scripts folder. So to do that, we can type ... and then slash to go to the outer folder. And then we're going to go to the data folder. So we'll type data / to go into this folder, and we'll locate cart.js. So cart.js and save. And next, we're going to loop through this cart and generate the HTML, just like we did for the home page. So let's close this for now. And here, we're going to create a loop over the cart. So we'll type cart.for each brackets and a function. And then we'll give it a parameter. Let's call it cart item. And then for each cart item here, we're going to generate this HTML. So in here, let's create a template string for the HTML using backticks. And we'll create some new lines. And then here, we're going to copy and paste the HTML for one of these products. So first, let's find the HTML for one of these products. And to do that, we can right-click, inspect, and then click this top left icon. And then click the element we want to get the HTML for. So here's the HTML for one of these products. And we're going to search for this class cart item container in our code. So inside our code, let's open checkout.html. And we'll type Control F or Command F to search for code. And we'll search for the class cart-item-container, which is this code right here. So if we collapse it and collapse this, this is the code for these two products here. So we're going to take this HTML and we're going to move it into our JavaScript so we can generate it with JavaScript. So we'll right-click, copy, and then in here, right-click and paste. And if we need to fix the formatting, we can select all of these lines and then press Shift-Tab to remove some indents. And I'll add an indent here. Next, when we're generating this HTML, we want to replace this with the actual product's image and this with the actual product's name. So we're going to take this cart item and use it to get the data that we need. So let's open cart.js to see what each cart item looks like. So we have the product ID and the quantity. So first, we need to use this product ID to search for the product in order to get the other details, like the image, the name, and the price. So to do that, let's get the product ID out of the cart item first. So we'll create a variable const product ID equals the cart item dot product ID. And now we need to use this to search for the full product. So the full product, we open our files, is inside products.js, which is this array right here. So I'm just going to move this up here so we can see it side by side. So to search inside this array, we actually need to import products into checkout.js. So let's use some module features again. At the top, we'll import curly brackets, the products array, and we'll import it from single quotes and semicolon. And then here, we'll locate the products.js file. So we'll type ... to go out of the scripts folder, and then we'll go into the data folder, data, and then a slash to go into this folder, and we'll import from products.js. So products.js and save. So now we have access to this products array here, and we'll search the array for the full product details. So down here, let's create a variable to save the result. So we'll type let, and we'll name it matching product. And then down here, we'll loop through the products array. So we'll type products.for each brackets and a function, and then we'll give it a parameter, product. And now for each product here, we're going to check if the ID property is equal to our product ID here. So down here, we'll check if the product.id property is equal to our product ID up here. And then if they're equal, that means we found the matching product, and we're going to save it in this variable. So matching product equals this product that we're looping through. So now that we have the matching product, we have access to the image, the name, as well as the price that we can use to generate this HTML. So this is a good example of deduplicating or normalizing our data. So now at the bottom, let's console.log our matching product to see if it works. So matching product and save. Now if we go into our project and we right-click, inspect, and check our console, you can see that we were able to get the full product details for each of these products using the product ID. So now that we have the full product details, we can use this to generate all this HTML. So down here, instead of generating the same image every time, we're going to use the image in the matching product. So let's get rid of this code. And here, we're going to remove this, and we're going to substitute using $curly brackets, the matching product.image. And we'll scroll down, and instead of the same product name every time, we're going to replace this, and we're going to substitute the matching product.name. So each time, we're going to generate HTML with a different image and a different name. And down here, the same thing. Remove the price, and we'll replace it with matching product dot, and then we'll just check here what the property is. It's called price cents. And remember, this is in cents, and to display it as dollars, we have to convert it by dividing by 100 and save. And lastly, we're going to replace the quantity here. So if we scroll down, we can see that this is the quantity. So instead of 2 every time, we'll substitute. And for the quantity, remember it's not part of a product, it's part of our cart. So each cart item has a property called quantity. So down here, we're going to substitute the cart item dot quantity and save. So now we're generating all this HTML by looping through our cart. So the next step is we're going to combine all this HTML together and then put it on the page. So I'm just going to move this up here so we can see more of the code. So to combine all this HTML together, let's create a variable up here to store the result. So we'll type let, and let's call it the cart summary HTML equals an empty string. And now each time we loop through the cart, we're going to add this HTML up here so that we combine it. So here we'll type cart summary HTML plus equals this HTML that we generated. And at the bottom, I'll just add a semicolon. And then let's console.log the cart summary HTML. So .log cart summary HTML to make sure that it worked. So we'll save, and then in here, we'll check the console, right-click, inspect the console. And now you can see that we generated the HTML, and each cart item is different depending on the product that is being displayed. So that's how we generate all the HTML for this section. And the last step is to take this and put it on the page using the DOM. So first, we need an element that we can put the HTML inside of. To find this element, let's right-click, inspect, and click the top left, and click one of these products. And let's find this order summary element, because this contains both of our products here. So we're going to replace all the HTML inside here with what we generated. So let's search for the class order summary in our code. So we'll go back to our code, and let's open checkout.html. And we'll type Control F or Command F to search for code, and we'll search for the class order-summary, and then it's right here. And we're going to add a class, so we can select it using the DOM. So js-order-summary, and save. So now let's use the DOM and put this element in our JavaScript. So inside here, at the bottom, we'll use document.querySelector, brackets, and the class we just created, .js-order-summary, and we'll use the property .inner capital HTML, and we'll change the HTML to cart summary HTML, and we can remove this line. And now if we save, we're basically generating all this HTML with JavaScript and then putting it on the page. So now we can go back to checkout.html, and we can actually remove the code inside this order summary. So we can delete this code and save, and everything will still work because this is now being generated by JavaScript.
42 lakhs per annum.
Wow, 42 lakhs, that's your salary?
Yes.
And what do you do?
I'm an AI tools in charge.
So that's how we create the cart section of this page with JavaScript. Let's go into Git and save our changes. So we'll open the Git section, and then it will tell us that we changed 3 files. In checkout.html, we removed all the HTML that was written manually. And then at the bottom, we created a script tag to load our JavaScript. And then we also changed cart.js and added some default values to work with. And then we created checkout.js, which loops through the cart, creates the HTML, and puts it on the page. So let's create a message to describe our changes. Generate HTML for the order summary, and commit. Next, let's open our project again. And before we continue, we actually have 2 issues that we need to fix. The first issue is that the price is displaying as 1 decimal here instead of 2. And the second issue is that these delivery options are actually shared between the 2 products. For example, if I click this delivery option here, it will actually unselect for the second product. So they're sort of shared between the 2 products. But what we actually want is for each product to be able to select its own delivery options. So we're going to fix these 2 issues next. First, let's focus on the price, and we want to display it in 2 decimals. So we actually learned how to fix this on the homepage using the method toFixed. So we're going to use the same code here. Let's go into our code, and we'll open our files, and let's open checkout.js again. So here, we're going to scroll down to where we display the price, which is here, price cents. And to show this in 2 decimal places, we're going to surround this with brackets to make sure we calculate it first, and then use the method .toFixed, brackets, and then 2 to show 2 decimal places. If we save, and then open our project, now the price is displaying correctly. Before we move on, we're going to learn how to better organize this code. So if we go back, so notice that we're using this code inside the checkout page, as well as inside amazon.js, which is the home page. So we can actually share this code between the 2 files, so we don't have to repeat it. And to do that, we can use modules. So let's open checkout.js again. And what we'll do is we're going to create a function that does the same thing as this code. And then we can share this function between the 2 files. So let's create a file that's going to contain this shared function. So we're going to go to our scripts folder here. And inside, we're going to create a new folder this time. And let's call this folder utils. And press enter. So we're naming it utils because this code is sort of like a useful utility that we want to share. Now inside this folder, we're going to have different types of utils. So let's create a new file. And let's name it money.js. So this file is going to contain utilities that are related to money, which is this code right here. So let's press enter. And I'm just going to move this to the bottom so we can see it side by side. So now inside this utils file, we're going to create a function that does the same thing as here. And then we can share it between the 2 files. So here, we'll create a function, and let's name it format currency, because that's what this code is doing. And then brackets and curly brackets. So this function is basically going to do the same thing as here. So we're going to add a parameter here, price cents, because we want to use this function for any amount of price cents. And then in here, we're going to do the same thing, which is price cents divided by 100. And then we're going to surround this with brackets to make sure we calculate this first, and then display it in 2 decimal places using .toFixed, brackets, and 2. And finally, let's return this result. Return, and save. So what we just did is we created a function that does the same thing as this code here. And now we're going to share this function between checkout.js and amazon.js. So first, in order to share it, we need to export this function. So at the front, we're going to type export and save. And now inside each of these files, we're going to import this function and use it. So let's scroll to the top. And here, we're going to import curly brackets. We're going to import the function format currency, and we're going to import it from single quotes and semicolon. And then inside here, we're going to locate the file money.js. So here, we're in the checkout.js file, which is right here. And to go here, we're first going to go into the utils folder. So we're going to type utils and then a slash to go into this folder. And we're going to locate the file money.js. So money.js. Now for modules, we have to do one extra thing. At the front of this file path, we need to type /. So remember that /. Represents the folder outside the current folder. So for checkout.js, if we go outside of this folder, we're going to go outside the scripts folder. Now a single dot, on the other hand, means the current folder. So this dot means we're going to go into the current folder, which is the scripts folder, and then we're going to go into the utils folder. And then we're going to go and locate money.js. So for modules, if we want to start in the current folder, our file paths have to start with /. So that's one extra thing that we have to do. So now that we've imported the format currency function, let's use it in the rest of our code. So we're going to scroll down to here, and instead of writing this all over again, we're just going to use the function format currency, and then brackets, and we're going to remove the rest of the code here, and close bracket, and save. So we're basically running the same code, except we're using this shared function that's located in another file. So let's open our project, and we can see that the price is still displaying correctly. So now let's go back into our code, and we're going to share this function inside amazon.js as well. So let's open amazon.js, and then we'll scroll to where we show the price, which is here, and we're going to use this function again. So first we have to import it. So we'll scroll up to the top and import curly brackets. We'll import the function format currency, and we'll import it from single quotes semicolon, and then here we'll locate the file money.js. So remember, for modules, if we want to start in the current folder, we have to type // and then we're going to go to the utils folder. So utils and then a slash to go inside the folder and locate the file money.js. And now we're going to use this function. So let's scroll down, and we're going to replace this code and use format currency and brackets. So we can remove the rest of the code here and save. And now let's look at our project, and we'll click up here to go back to the home page, and you can see that the prices are displaying as 2 decimal places. And that's it. If we look at our code again, we're essentially taking this function and sharing it across 2 files using modules. So using modules, we can reuse a lot of our code and reduce repetition. Next, let's work on the second issue that we saw earlier. So we'll go back to our project and click the top right to go back to the checkout page. And then here, the delivery options are shared between the 2 products, but we want each product to choose its own delivery options. So to fix that, let's go back into our code, and I'm just going to resize it here so we can see it side by side. And we'll open checkout.js again, and we can close this for now. So this is an HTML element called a radial selector, and here's the code for a radial selector. So the way that radial selectors work is that if a set of radial selectors have the same name, then we can only select one of them. So for example, if these 3 radial selectors have the same name attribute, then we can only select one of them. Now, if the 3 at the top have one name and the 3 at the bottom have a different name, then we can select one from the first 3 as well as one from the second 3. Now, what's the problem with the radial selectors here? Well, let's take a look at the code for these selectors. To do that, we're going to right-click one of them and then inspect, and then click the top left and click one of these selectors to get the HTML code. So here we have the code for the radial selector, and you can see that the name of the selector is delivery option 1. And now if we click the top left again and find one of these bottom selectors, you'll notice that these also have the name delivery option 1. So all 6 of these have the same name attribute. That's why we can only select one of these 6 at a time. So what we actually want to do is we want the first 3 selectors to have one name and the second 3 selectors to have a different name. So let's figure out how to give these a different name. So inside the console, we can see the code for this selector, and we have a name attribute delivery-option-1. So let's actually find this name in our code. So we'll go to our code editor and Control F or Command F to search for code, and we'll search for delivery-option-1. And if we scroll down, you'll notice that every time we're generating these radial selectors, we're always using the same name, delivery option 1. So every product is going to have the same name for the radial selectors, and all of these are going to be shared. So what we actually want to do is, instead of using the name delivery option 1 every time, each product is going to use a different name for these 3 selectors. So one way we can do that is, instead of the number 1 every time, we can replace it with the product's ID, because the ID is always unique for each product. So let's substitute using $ and curly brackets the product.id. And then down here as well, instead of using the name 1 every time, we're going to substitute product.id. And actually, we use the name matching product. So we'll scroll down and just update this to matching product. And then down here, matching product. And as well down here, instead of 1 every time, substitute the matching product.id and save. So now these 3 radial selectors will have a different name attribute than these 3 radial selectors. That means we can select 1 out of these 3, and we can select 1 out of these 3. So that's how we fix that error. Instead of using the same name, delivery option 1 every time, we're going to generate a name using the product's ID. So let's go into Git and save our changes. So in Amazon.js, we imported this shared function, and we used it to format the price in 2 decimal places. And then in checkout.js, we also used the shared function here, and we fixed the radial selectors. And then in this file, money.js, we created this shared function. So let's create a message to describe our changes, fix price formatting, and radio selectors, and commit.
Hi, I'm Jared, and I use Bittrex 24 to manage projects because it gives me choice. Oh, a new project.
The last step in our process is to make it interactive. So I'm just going to close these for now and going to move it to the right again so we can see our project. And for the order summary, there's a few things we can make interactive. For now, we're going to start with this delete link. When we click this link, it should remove this product from the cart. So we're going to learn how to build this. So let's go back to our code. And first, let's add event listeners to all of these delete links. To do that, we're going to find the code for these delete links. So we'll right-click, inspect. And then in here, this is the code. So we're going to search for this class in our code editor, delete-quantity-link. So in here, let's open checkout.js. And we're going to Control F or Command F and search for delete-quantity-link, which is right here. Next, we're going to add a class to these elements so we can add event listeners. So at the end here, let's add a class js-delete-link and save. And then at the bottom, we're going to scroll down. And then out here, we're going to add the event listeners. So first, we're going to select all the delete links on the page using document.querySelector, all, brackets, and then a string. And we're going to select a class using dot and the class js-delete-link. And then we're going to loop through all these links. So dot for each, brackets, and a function. And in here, it will give us the link every time. And then for each of these links, we're going to add an event listener. So link.add event listener, brackets. And here, we're going to give a string and the event we want to listen for, which is a click, and then a function that we want to run when we click these links. So for now, let's just console.log string delete to make sure that it's working. So we'll save this. And then in here, we click these delete links, and then open the console, right-click, inspect, console. We can see that it's working now. So now let's go back to our code. So when we click delete, we're going to do two steps. The first step is we're going to remove the product from the cart. And the second step is we're also going to update our HTML and remove the product from the page. So let's start with the first step. So when we click delete, how do we know which product we need to remove from the cart? So we learned how to do this for the add it to cart button. We can attach the product's ID to the link element. So let's scroll up again to where the delete link is, which is right here. And we're going to attach the product's ID to this element using a data attribute. So at the end here, we're going to add data dash attach the product's ID to the link element. So we learned how to do this. Let's start with the first step. So when we click delete, how do we know which product we need to remove from the cart? So we learned how to do this for the add it to cart button. We can attach the product's ID to the link element. So let's scroll up again to where the delete link is, which is right here. And we're going to attach the product's ID. We need to remove from the cart and remove the product from the page. So let's start with the first step. So when we click delete, how do we know which product we need to remove from the cart? So we learned how to do this for the add it to cart button. We can attach the product's ID to the link element. So let's scroll up again to where the delete link is, which is right here. And we're going to attach the product's ID to this element using a data attribute. So at the end here, we're going to add data-product-ID equals double quotes. And then here, we'll substitute the matching product.id and save. And now that we attach the product ID to this element, we can get it in our JavaScript below. So let's scroll down. And then here, we're going to delete this line. And using the link element, we can get that product ID using link.dataset to access the data attributes. And we're going to access .product ID. And let's save this in a variable so we can use it later. So const product ID equals this value. And let's console.log this to see if it works. And save. So now if we go to the project and click the delete link for the first product, and then look at the console, inspect and console, it will show us the product's ID. If we click the second product's delete link, it will show us the second product's ID. So now we have the ID that we need to remove from the cart. So now how do we actually do that? So before we begin figuring that out, instead of writing all the code down here, let's actually create a function inside cart.js to do this task. The reason we're going to do this is because cart.js is supposed to contain all the code that's related to the cart. So this will help us organize our code better. So let's open our files again, and we're going to open cart.js. And we're going to scroll to the bottom, and we're going to create a function for removing a product from the cart. So let's type function, and let's name it remove from cart, brackets and curly brackets. So this function will take a product ID, which we have, and remove it from the cart. So here, let's create a parameter for the ID, product ID, and now in here, we're going to figure out how to remove it. So here's one way we can do this. First, we can create a new array, and then we can loop through our cart, and then add each product to the new array, except for this product ID. So now let's convert these steps into code. So inside this function here, let's create a new array using const. We'll call it new cart equals an empty array. The next step is we're going to loop through our cart. So we'll type cart.for each, brackets, and a function, and we'll give it a parameter cart item.
3 years, 3 cities, for an experience like you've never had before. You want it all. Go.
And the last step is that we're going to add each cart item to the new array, except if it has this product ID. So we can do that by checking if the cart item.product ID is not equal to the product ID that we're looking for. Product ID. So if it's not equal to the product we're trying to remove, we're going to add it to the new cart. So new cart.push cart item. So the result of this loop is it's going to contain all the cart items that don't match this product ID. And that's the same thing as removing this from the cart. So now the last step is we're going to take our new cart and replace the cart up here. So we'll scroll down, and then here we'll make cart equal to our new cart. Because we're reassigning this variable, we have to scroll up and change it from const to let, and save. So now that we created this function, let's use it in our checkout page. First, we're going to use the modules feature and export this function, and save. And then inside checkout.js, we're going to import this function. So I'm just going to move this down to the bottom so we can see it side by side. So here. So in checkout.js, we're going to scroll up, and we're already importing from cart.js, so we're just going to import one additional thing by typing comma, and we're going to import this function, remove from cart, and save. And then we're going to use this function at the bottom. So we'll scroll down, and then here, we're going to remove from cart, brackets, and we're going to give it the product ID we want to remove. So product ID. And lastly, let's just console.log the cart to make sure that this works. So console.log the cart, and save. So now let's go into our project, and we're going to click this delete link for the first product. So delete, and let's open the console. Right-click, inspect the console, and now it's going to show us that we have one product remaining in the cart. And this product has a quantity of 1, which is the second product here. So by clicking that delete link, we successfully removed this product from the cart. So now if we refresh and try clicking the second delete link and look at the console, and then expand the cart, it will tell us that the remaining product has a quantity of 2, which is this product. So we successfully removed the second product from the cart when we click delete. So now let's go into Git and look at our changes. So we'll go into this section. I can close this for now, and we'll open Git, and it will tell us that in cart.js, we changed it to let, and we created this new click the delete link. We're going to remove this product message to it. So if we go back to our project, when we click delete, we want to remove this product from the page. So one way we can do this is first, we're going to use the DOM to get the element we want to remove. And then we can use a method called .remove. So every element that we get from the DOM has a method called .remove, which removes it from the page. So first of all, how do we know which element to get from the page? So let's actually look at the HTML for one of these products. We're going to right-click, inspect, and then click the top left, and then click one of these products here. And this will give us the HTML. So these two products are represented by these two divs here, with a class cart-item-container. So one way to identify which product this is for is to add a special class to this element. And this class will contain the product ID. And then if we go back to our code, and we open checkout.js, and scroll to the bottom, when we click delete, we have the product ID here. So we can use this to select that special class that we're going to add. So first, let's add that special class to each of these elements. So we're going to scroll up to the HTML, and we're going to go to the top here, to the div cart-item-container. And then here, we'll add a special class, js-cart-item-container, and then we'll substitute the product's ID. So we'll type the matching product.id. And let's put this class on a separate line, so the line is not too long. Now let's save. And now we're going to scroll to the bottom and use our code to get this class. So we'll scroll to the bottom. And here, we're going to use the DOM as well as this product ID to get that special class that we just added above. So here, we can type document.querySelector, brackets, and then inside, we'll type a string, and we'll select the class using a .js-cart-item-container, and then we're going to substitute the product ID. So because we want to insert something in here, we're going to switch this to a template string using backticks. And now we can substitute this product ID into the string, product ID. So by creating the string like this, we're able to select the specific container that we need. So now let's save this in a variable so we can use it later. So const container equals this result. So for now, let's actually console.log this to see if it works. Console.log container, and save. And then we'll go back to our project. So just move this here. And then in our project, if we click delete on the first product, and then check the console, right-click, inspect, and the console, you can see that we're getting the correct element that we should delete. If we go down here and click this delete link, and check the console, you can see that this is also getting us the correct element that we want to delete. So now that we have the element we want to delete, the next step is to use the .remove method. So again, every element we get with the DOM has a method called .remove, which will remove it from the page. So if we go back into our code, now here, all we have to do is type out the element container.remove and brackets, and this will remove it from the page. If we save and try it out, so we'll go in here, we'll click delete on the first product, and it will remove it from the page. If we click delete on the second product, it will also remove it from the page. So that's it. Now let's refresh to bring the products back, and that's how we make the delete link interact.